Generally how I kind of kick off these classes, I'm going to start by opening up our task list for the week and kind of go through what our objectives. So I'm going to share my screen here and head over to the task list. Just move this out of the way. So, like we kind of talked about back on Tuesday, the weekly task lists, just in each of those weekly folders on Brightspace, just kind of outlines what to expect for the week. We kind of went through this briefly already, but I like to pull it up just to make sure everyone's on track. So on Tuesday, we kind of got through most of task one, getting a copy of the textbook, either a hard copy or the ebook, getting your AutoCAD software set up and running on your computer. So we went through the installation process, getting your license, that kind of deal. Before we kind of move forward to task two for today, is anyone still having any trouble with their installation or any questions about the textbook or anything like that?
Yeah, for the textbook, when you order the online version, it asks for your address and shipping address and stuff like that. Does that mean it's shipping a physical copy as well, or what does that mean?
No, it asks for your address. I don't really know 100% for sure why. I think it just might be for record keeping or something like that. I've recently bought the latest copy of the textbook myself, and it asks you for your address. It ends up just emailing you a link of how to get the code to activate that ebook. So it's not going to send you a physical copy or anything. You just get a link.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. You have to open it with like a third-party software. Uh, it's not something you have to download or anything. It's just in the browser. I think it's called Gilmore Global. They give you a link to go into Gilmore Global and then activate the textbook through there. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, if we're good to go then. I've also gone through my settings here and made my cursor a bit comically large and yellow, just so it's a bit easier to see what I might be pointing at for today, because we're going to be doing a lot of touring around the AutoCAD UI, the user interface, to kind of get an idea, get our feet wet a little bit with AutoCAD. There's going to be a lot of terminology kind of coming up for different locations on the user interface. In the textbook, and then even myself, I'll be bringing up some of this terminology. It's just to kind of help prep you. So when we're looking for specific tools or specific settings, if someone says, oh, it's in the ribbon, I know where the ribbon is. You can go look for it where the ribbon's located, kind of idea. So that's what we be mainly kind of covering for today. Task two, going through chapter one here. We'll do a few kind of little practice exercises in chapter one. And then the chapter one review questions is going to be up to you guys if you decide to go through those review questions. I briefly mentioned that on Tuesday as well. Each chapter of the AutoCAD textbook has kind of a little practice test at the back end of the chapter. And that's just to kind of make sure you get all the key concepts out of that chapter. If you can go through and kind of quickly answer those yourself, then you're pretty much set. And then as a bit of a reminder as well for those review questions, if I go back to my Brightspace here, the solutions are just in this little folder here, chapter one review questions, solutions for them, so you can kind of check your answers. Okay, so we'll get started with chapter one. If I'm ever going too fast and you need a bit of time to kind of catch up, maybe you didn't catch where I was pointing at on my screen or anything like that, just let me know. Feel free to kind of shout out and I'll slow down. So for lesson one, we're going to go through some fundamentals with AutoCAD. Again, I love the user interface, how to open, close, save files, that kind of deal. Just getting started, getting our feet wet a little bit with the user interface. So this is kind of the list of things that we'll be covering in lesson one. Again, basic initial setup, the drawing environment, identify the basic layout and features of the AutoCAD user interface, locate specific commands and launch them using different command interfaces. That's a bit kind of a complicated and wordy way of saying there's multiple ways for you to use the tools in AutoCAD. We can kind of manually look for those buttons and click them and use them. We can also use something called the command line on AutoCAD, and we'll get into that in a bit more detail in a bit here. But we can type in commands, and then it's a bit of a faster way to execute commands in AutoCAD. The kind of difference between using buttons versus using command line's a bit faster, but you have to be aware of what commands are available to you in the first place. Using the buttons is a bit more kind of beginner friendly. It's a little bit more tedious though, because you kind of have to know where the buttons are and maybe kind of look for them. So we'll kind of talk about that in a bit more detail as well. We'll talk about locating points on the AutoCAD Cartesian workspace. We'll kind of talk about what that specifically means. Uh, AutoCAD has its own coordinate system, so we can make precise measurements of our drawings. We want to know where, if I go to draw any shapes or anything like that, I want to draw a line. I need to know where those precise points where I'm placing the line are so that my lines connect properly. They're placed either on the grid lines to kind of help aid me in making my precise line drawings, things of that kind of nature. We'll talk about opening, editing, and closing existing drawings. Just like if you're kind of using a Word, Microsoft Word, opening Word documents, being able to go in there, type whatever text, that would be your editing, and then how to close it or save that document as well. You'll kind of find as well, AutoCAD is pretty beginner friendly. A lot of the user interface is pretty similar to a lot of Microsoft Office uh, user interfaces. So stuff that you kind of assume would be in this spot or this position on Microsoft Word or Excel or something like that is going to generally kind of be in a similar space that it would be on AutoCAD. We'll talk about moving a drawing using navigation options. So we'll be using, if you're drawing a drawing, maybe I want to zoom in into some fine details, or I want to drag my drawing around to look at a different location. So we'll be using those navigation tools to kind of change how we're viewing our drawing. And then finally, saving drawings in various formats and setting our automatic save. So AutoCAD has an automatic backup save system. I think by default, it's every 10 minutes it makes a backup save. So we'll kind of talk about those details as well for saving drawings and then the automatic save. Any questions about what to expect for today? Okay, if we're all good to go, we'll get started with some user interface. Or starting the software, suppose first, then user interface. Okay, so if we all have AutoCAD downloaded on our computers, this one says 2019, we downloaded 2025, not a big deal. Either in your installation process, you'll now have an AutoCAD shortcut on your desktop. If you don't have that shortcut, you can go into your all programs through your operating system to go look for how to launch your AutoCAD. So on my computer here, I just have a shortcut on my home page here for AutoCAD 2025. If your installation didn't automatically make this, then you can go into your program files and then File Explorer. Let me make sure I have the right path here. Autodesk. In my C drive here, I believe in program files first. I'll make sure I have the right path here. Yeah, okay. So if you go to your C drive on your computer, In this file explorer, just on your C drive, should have the C colon program files, not the times 86 version, just the generic program files folder, and then Autodesk, and then your AutoCAD 2025. And then you should be able to scroll down and you have your application launcher for AutoCAD. So that's just if you don't have the desktop shortcut. Okay. Anyone having trouble finding their AutoCAD? Anyone missing AutoCAD from their computer? Or are we all good to go?
Sir, can you please explain again?
Yep. So to launch AutoCAD, either during your installation process, it might have made a shortcut on your desktop. So you have AutoCAD 2025 on my desktop here. So you can double click that to open AutoCAD. If that shortcut isn't on your desktop, where it saves AutoCAD to by default is in your program files. So if I need to get to my program files, I'll right click on my start menu on my desktop here, go to File Explorer. From here, you should have the File Explorer open. This is just where you kind of look through all of your files on your computer. You should go to your C drive. That's probably your hard drive on your computer. From the C drive to program files, just the one called program files, not the times 86. So into program files. And then in the program files folder, there's Autodesk. Remember that Autodesk is the developer and publisher of AutoCAD. So into the Autodesk folder, then we have AutoCAD 2025. That's the version we're using. And then in this folder, if we scroll down just a little ways, there should be an application here called ACAD AutoCAD. And double clicking that should launch your AutoCAD as well.
Thank you, sir.
So, yep, no problem. Okay, so when AutoCAD is launched, an initial start window displays. So when you open your AutoCAD, it should look something like this. And this is what I was kind of hinting at on Tuesday. If you manage to get to this screen, then you're really good to go for working with AutoCAD. So this is my start screen. You can see that kind of in the top left here, there's a little tab called Start that's open. So the Start tab, always or AutoCAD, whenever it's launched, is always open to the Start tab. On the Start tab, we have a little pane on the left here, and then this larger pane that kind of covers most of the middle and the right. So the left pane is where most of my controls are. We have Open and New. Of course, we don't have a drawing file open, so AutoCAD is kind of prompting us to open a drawing file or create a new drawing file. What we have here as well is these kind of little tabs for recent Autodesk projects, learning, and My Insights. By default, it always opens recent, and this will show your recent drawing files that were opened last time you had AutoCAD open. There's also Autodesk projects, My Insights. We're not going to be using those. They're not really that important. Autodesk projects kind of pulls packages of drawings and some other files that you can kind of quickly pull. We're not going to be using that for the sake of this course. There's no real point. A lot of our projects are too small to kind of warrant having a huge project package. My insights is kind of data collection and things. We're not concerned about that. Learning can be a little helpful. In here, there's a few little tips, online resources for learning resources, and kind of guides to AutoCAD. Sometimes they put in little videos in here for new updates or kind of methods to do or use some of the tools. So in learning, there's kind of some additional resources in here as well. For the kind of sake of using AutoCAD, most of the time you're only really using the recent tab. So go back to my slides here. If you ever need to go back to the start window, if I say I'm just going to open a new drawing here, so I'll select new. And it's giving me a new blank drawing file. If I ever need to go back to the start menu, I can go click on that same file tab that I was pointing at earlier, where it says start. I can click on that to go back to the start menu, or I can use Control Home. I don't know if I have a, yeah. So Control Home will also send you back. I don't know if you care that much about using the shortcut when the tab's right there, but it's another option.
What is the home button?
Home button should be, if you're on a kind of larger keyboard, it's between your enter key and your numpad on your keyboard. If you're on a laptop, it might not have a home key.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the UI?
Can you scroll through multiple projects with like home or control something?
Yes. So I'm not sure about the exact shortcut. I usually just click on the file tabs myself. But one of the kind of little things to pick up on here as well is that I can have multiple drawing files open at a single time. So if I keep going back to this home tab and hitting new, I can keep opening new drawings here. It's just using a template to kind of give me a blank drawing, but then I can easily flip between different drawings. Say I draw a circle on this one, a line on this one, and a rectangle on this one. So if I have kind of multiple drawings and I need to pull little bits and pieces from them to kind of copy them over or anything like that, you can have multiple drawing files open at the same time on AutoCAD.
Is there like a button you can scroll between them quickly?
I'm not 100% sure. Let me. Yeah, I'll have to double check. I usually just end up clicking on the tabs themselves. There's probably a shortcut though. AutoCAD generally has a lot of shortcuts for all kinds of stuff. I'll double check that for you.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I can take
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So we'll move on. Any other questions before we move on here? Before I get carried away? Okay. So we'll move on to the user interface itself. So if you haven't already, just from the Start tab here, just hit New and make a new drawing. This will just open a blank drawing based on a template. We'll talk about templates quite a bit further down the line. But this is the same kind of effective method as if you were starting a Word document and you hit blank Word document and it gives you a blank document to start typing on. Same idea. So this is giving you a blank drawing. It just gives it a generic name, drawing 1, drawing 2, drawing 3, etc. And lets you start drawing your drawing. So we're going to take a little tour around the user interface. Again, in the textbook, I'll be referencing a lot of this terminology. So if I say X tool is located here, you'll at least be aware of where kind of to look. So back to my slides here. We have this slide here. It has these numbered kind of little areas. We're going to go through these one by one. In the Brightspace as well, there's a file in the week 1 folder called AutoCAD user interface. If you open this guy up, you should have a file that is kind of a blown up version of that image as well. So I'll go back here. So starting with my user interface, starting with number 1 here. This one's a bit weird. The numbers got kind of skewed in this PowerPoint, which is why I have the separate version too. This 1 should be closer to the top left corner here. So number 1, the very first one on our user interface list here, is the application menu. So if I go back to my AutoCAD, that's this guy in the top left, the AutoCAD kind of symbol or icon with the little drop menu arrow beside it. This is my application menu. So if you kind of recall back to things like Word or Excel, this is the same thing as kind of like your File tab. So when you open the File tab on Microsoft Word, it's for stuff like saving, opening, starting new documents. AutoCAD works pretty much the same way here. So in my application menu, we have New for creating new blank drawings, Open for opening existing drawing files. So if you download files off of Brightspace or off the internet or anything like that and save them to your computer, you can open them from here. We have Save and Save As. Does anyone know what the difference between Save and Save As is?
Save saves to the same file name. Save as gives you the option to save to a different file name.
Yep, more or less. Save as, more kind of typical use is like if you haven't saved this file before and you want to save it as a new name, just like you mentioned, then Save As will prompt me to save it to a location and give it a file name. Whereas Save is more kind of like a quick save. If that drawing file is already associated to a file on your computer, it'll just overwrite that file. We have a few other tools in here. Import and export. This is for changing the file type. So AutoCAD is going to use drawing files. Files saved and loaded into AutoCAD are typically the file extension .dwg. So if you kind of think about Word files, they're .doc, doc for document, or .xls for Excel spreadsheet, .jpeg for pictures, or .png. So the file extension for AutoCAD files is .dwg for drawing. You can see at the top of my screen here too, it says drawing2.dwg. So that .dwg is the file extension for drawing files. So my import and export, they help me kind of change what the file type is. So if I have a drawing file and it's .dwg, my printer can't recognize drawing files because AutoCAD is a different kind of software that printers can't recognize. So I can export my drawing file to something like a PDF file, and then use that PDF file to go ahead and print. Or share it across the office. You might email PDFs instead of drawing files, things like that. In here as well, we have our printer and plotter. This is for when we kind of finish our drawing and we want to go to print it, either physical paper or plot it to PDF, and kind of preview how that drawing is going to look before we print it. This is what our kind of print section's for. We also have drawing utilities. This is a lot of our settings for AutoCAD. One that we'll be using a decent amount is units in this list here. Units will allow me to kind of control what units AutoCAD is using. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail as well in just a bit here. In the application menu as well, the very bottom here, we have options and exit Autodesk. So you can close AutoCAD through the application menu. And there's also these additional options for a lot of kind of general settings for AutoCAD. So things like display, if you want to change colors of stuff. In here as well, this first section with window elements, by default, AutoCAD uses dark mode. It's a bit easier on the eyes. But if you do prefer the light theme, you can switch that over to the light theme from this menu, and you get the kind of white ribbons at the top and bottom.
Where was that menu again?
Yep. Top left, the application menu. And then at the bottom of this menu is options. And then it should give you this little pop-up here. And then under display, where it says window elements, you can change the color theme between light and dark mode. Might as well mention it while we're here too. You can change the colors of pretty much anything on AutoCAD. So if you kind of have a hard time seeing grid lines or anything like that, then there's also this colors button just at the bottom of the window elements window, I suppose, here. And then in here, you can change the colors of a lot of stuff. This isn't mandatory by any means. It's just if you kind of have trouble seeing things, or if you're colorblind with some of the colors that AutoCAD uses, then you can change them here as well.
So how, if our toolbar magically disappeared, how do we get that back?
Which bar specifically? This one at the top?
Yeah.
So it might be that you bumped this guy up here. If you click through them a few times, it should return. This guy right in the center top.
Yeah, I don't even have that anymore.
Oh, that's a bit strange. Well, let me.
That AutoCAD did crash on me.
I see. If you relaunch, it should probably pop up again. I'll double check what the shortcut is too. Okay. If your ribbon is missing, this top huge toolbar up here, in this command bar down here, just type in ribbon. Wrong keyboard. And then hit enter, and you should show up again. So if I hide it here,
Perfect.
it should
Thank
be.
you.
Yeah. Okay. So that more or less covers our application menu. So kind of to summarize, application menus for a lot of our global kind of Autodesk wide or AutoCAD wide settings. And it's for a lot of our file management. So opening new files, saving files, exporting and importing, printing, that kind of general idea. Going back to my slide here. We'll jump around a little bit here. I'll go in order just so it's not too confusing. Number 2 is just in the kind of middle bottomish area down here. What number 2 is pointing out on my user interface is the crosshair or your cursor location. So if I go back to AutoCAD, whenever I move my mouse over this area down here, I get this kind of crosshair, this plus sign with a little square in the middle. That's just showing me where my cursor is on the drawing space. With the crosshair, sometimes we get something called a tooltip. Whenever I'm using tools, something like, I'll use something really basic like line. So I'm just going to select line. You can see now my crosshair has changed a little bit. That square in the middle is now missing. It's just the plus sign. And I have this little kind of squares of text saying specify first point and then some coordinates. So that area there where it says specify first point and then some numbers for my XY coordinates, that is called my tooltip. So whenever you're using tools in AutoCAD, it's always going to give you this little prompt in the tooltip. And it's basically AutoCAD telling you what you're supposed to be doing next with that tool. So since I chose line, in order to kind of determine where a line is determined by its start point and by its end point. So AutoCAD's prompting me right away to define where the start point of this line is. So if I scroll over here and type in 5, 5, then that prompt has put my first point of my line to the coordinate 5, 5. And then if I do 5, 6, I think I'll do 1, 6 actually. Then I moved that point over by 1 and then up by 6. So that tooltip is just prompting me to know what to do next with that tool. And we'll go into these tools. Don't worry if you don't know what the line command is doing or some of these extra settings. We'll get into that in detail. Just letting you know where things are and what they might be called. Okay, so after the crosshair or cursor location and the tooltip attached to it, the number 3 on this diagram is kind of in that blank space. So number 3 is trying to point you to the drawing area. So this entire kind of lower rectangular area here on AutoCAD is my drawing space or my drawing area. So this is anywhere that I can start drawing objects onto AutoCAD. Of course, if I choose something like line, I can start drawing it in the drawing area. I can't draw lines on the settings up here, of course. So anywhere in this kind of window, this rectangular window, is my drawing area. Going back here, number 4 is up here in the top left, kind of near our application menu, but off to the right a little bit. Number 4 is my quick access menu or quick access toolbar. This is basically a little summary of what's in the application menu. So, and I can kind of edit it to add and remove some things in there, and we'll talk about that too. So if you kind of recall back with the application menu, we have new, open, save, save as, print, etc. Same thing with this little quick access toolbar. We have open up here, save, save as. There's a few other ones up here that we won't really be using. There's our plot again. We have undo and redo up here. So this is like a little quick access toolbar for some of those things that are in the application menu. We can also kind of add and remove other things to this menu using this little drop-down menu at the end. It's a little arrow with a line above it. If I click this drop-down menu, I can add and remove or kind of customize that quick access toolbar. So if I don't often use this open from web and mobile kind of thing, if I don't have any purpose of using that or I don't use it very often, I can just uncheck it and I'll get rid of it from my quick access bar there. And if I use something very frequently, and want to add it to this list, then I can go into this quick access menu or customize again. And then if I say I use layers a lot and I'd like to have layers kind of as a quick access thing up there, then I can click that and it'll add that little widget up there so I can use my layers. So it's like a little extra little handy tool. If you find yourself using the same command or kind of same tool over and over again, you can pin them to your quick access toolbar so they're kind of easy to get at. Any questions? Am I going too fast or anything? Okay. So back to my slide here. We just covered the quick access. Number 5 here on this image is my ribbon. So 5, I know it's kind of like centrally placed, but when we talk about the ribbon, that's this entire upper space up here. So from where it says draw all the way to where it says view, this entire section here is my ribbon. So the ribbon is kind of similar to when you work with Word. In Word, you have probably like paragraph up here, and you have font size up here and stuff like that. Similar idea with AutoCAD. It's going to be all of our tools. So in Word, it's a lot of your tools for paragraphing and font size and font type. In AutoCAD, it's going to be a lot of our drawing tools, a lot of our editing tools, layers, annotation, etc. The ribbon itself is divided up into these categories as well. So you can see starting from the left here, we have this first section here. So these sections are called panels. This first panel is labeled draw. So this panel will include all of my drawing tools. So if I want to draw lines, polylines, circles, arcs, rectangles, ovals, anything that I'm drawing, those tools are going to be in this panel. Also, a kind of little quick tip, anywhere on AutoCAD where you see a downwards pointing arrow is indicating you that there's extra options for that tool. So in the case of circle here, if I just click on circle normally, it's going to use the default method of making a circle. But if I want to use a different way to determine how a circle is drawn, so by default, it's using center radius. It wants me to indicate where the center of that circle is and what the radius of that circle is. If I want to choose a different method, I can choose something else. Like if I want to choose 2 opposite ends of the circle to create it, or if I want it to be tangential or kind of stuck against another shape, we can use the tangential options. So anywhere I see a tool with a down arrow, or anywhere in AutoCAD in general where there's a downwards pointing arrow, there's going to be more options for that tool. Same with rectangles. I can hit the downwards button beside the rectangle button, and I get polygon as a different option. Each of these panels as well, where it says draw, so the panel itself has one of those downwards pointing arrows. So if I click on that arrow, I get an extended menu of some extra options there as well for drawing. So on top of my line, polyline, etc., there's also some other tools in here. For me to use, the less commonly used ones, of course. So after my draw panel here, we also have modify. This is another big one that we're going to be using pretty often. So when we talk about the modify panel, that's going to be all of our tools for modifying existing pieces of our drawing. So things like move, copy, rotate, anything that's going to edit or modify things already existing on our drawing. So if I go ahead and draw a line, that line is now drawn from the draw panel. Then if I want to modify it anyway, all of these settings in the modify panel are going to do some sort of change or edit to that pre-existing drawing. So things like move, to start moving, that object around. Your copy and paste are going to be in there. Your chamfer and fillet are in there. Things like scaling, stretching, mirroring, all of those modifying commands are going to be in your modify panel. And of course, we're going to go through all these tools in way more depth as kind of the weeks progress here. The next little panel we have here, by default, is our annotation. So annotation is going to be one of our topics later on. Annotation refers to whenever we add text or leaders or dimensions to our drawing. So if I want to make a drawing, a machined plate, and I want to kind of specify that it's this many inches by this many inches, we can use annotations to add dimensions to that drawing. If I'm doing something like a bill of materials or a kind of table of the parts associated with something I'm designing, we can add text to the drawing itself. So if we just need to put in title blocks, kind of titling our drawing, any text that we're adding to our drawing is also kind of going to be associated with our annotation. Moving on from annotation, we have layers. If anyone's kind of had experience with things like Photoshop, any image kind of editing software, you might be familiar with layers. Layers are a way for us to isolate specific parts of our drawing so we don't accidentally edit them. Or we can kind of change the settings between different layers. So if I kind of want to have a layer dedicated to plumbing, maybe I want to make all those lines blue. That can kind of help me separate the plumbing lines from electrical lines or from just building structure lines in my drawing. So this kind of helps segregate some of our lines from other lines in our drawing to kind of change their settings or to kind of avoid accidentally editing them. We also have block. We'll talk about blocks a fair bit as well. Blocks are kind of a compressed file version of a drawing component. So if I go ahead and draw something like a panel, and I'm going to be copying and pasting that panel a few times, maybe I want to save it as a block, and then I can recall that block back into the drawing as needed. So if I want to kind of like not have to draw out the panel every single time, but I have to make 8 of them, then I can save it as a block and recall it. It's kind of like a easier way of copy and pasting and saving it as kind of its own file. We'll get into that in much more detail later as well. We'll skip properties for now. We'll talk about that in a bit when we kind of cover more layer related stuff. Last kind of more useful one for now is also under this utilities tab or this utilities panel. We have measure. Measure is pretty helpful for well, measuring parts of your drawing. Just to make sure, again, a lot of our precision is very important in our drawing. Precision gets really important in drawings, not only for kind of your own sake, but for other people's sakes as well. So for your own purposes, it's good to be precise in your drawings. We don't want hanging decimal places on lengths of objects and stuff like that. Because if I design something and it's supposed to be 6 feet and it's 6 feet and an inch, if I have to put 12 of those side by side, all of a sudden I'm missing a foot or I'm out by a foot. So I don't want to have that kind of problem down the line. I want to make sure everything's precise in my drawing, because then I'm going to have to go back and scrap it and then make sure it's the right dimensions. It also kind of causes problems for other people down the line as well. If I'm making this drawing and then I'm handing it off to an electrician or something like that, and he kind of doesn't understand that the precision's out, he might have to come back to me over and over again and say, hey, why you designed it like this, but this stuff doesn't fit properly, or there's kind of problems with how I'm positioning my wire in this wall or something like that. So we don't want to have those kinds of conflicts with other people trying to read our drawings, and it's also going to compound to be problems for us drawing our drawings. So we generally want things to be pretty precise. So measure tool can be helpful for us to kind of measure out parts of our drawing. And we'll talk about the measure tool in a bit more detail later as well. Any questions about the ribbon? Again, we don't have to know anything about these tools yet. We're going to get into all of the tools in way more detail later. Just letting you know where kind of things are located. Good to go? Okay. So off to number 6. Number 6 is kind of highlighting in the top right corner there. There's a, let me move this Teams menu out of the way. There's a little bit of a help menu up here as well. So there's this kind of question mark button for help. And there's also this little search bar up here. So this is all of my info center. The info center is kind of baked into AutoCAD. It's connected to the internet. So if you're connected to Wi-Fi or plugged into Ethernet or anything like that, you can search specific things about AutoCAD within the program itself. And AutoCAD has its own kind of database for how their own tools work. So this help menu kind of you can use as a reference or as an additional resource. So if you don't know how one of the tools works, you can search it up in here and they'll come up with a web page giving you the details of how that tool works. What prompts is it going to give you? What kind of details is it asking for to make that tool work? And it even comes with some examples of how to use it as well. So up here's all my help menu kind of stuff. Number 7 here, this is also related to your tooltips. So if I go back to AutoCAD, whenever I hover over a tool on my ribbon, so if I'll hover over line for now, unless my tooltips aren't active. Let me just make sure my tooltips are working here. Display, show tooltips. Oh, there we go. Just wasn't showing up for a second there. So if I hover over any tool on my ribbon, I also get another tooltip. And this tooltip will also help me out and tell me how that tool works, what's it used for, and how do I kind of use that tool. So by hovering over the line tool here, it's telling me that the line tool is for creating straight line segments. With line, you can create a series of contiguous line segments. Each segment is a line object that can be edited separately. On top of that, at the bottom of the tooltip, it says there, press F1 for more help. So if I press F1 on my keyboard, this is where it sends me to that help desk again. And it gives me more details about how that command works. It tells me what the following prompts are going to be displayed. So it's going to ask me to specify for that first point and the next point that I kind of showed earlier. Some other additional options for that tool, like close or undo. Sometimes they have examples that they kind of work through as well. So AutoCAD has a lot of resources just baked into it for kind of helping you figure out how some of these tools work. Number 8 is in the bottom left here. This is my command bar or my command line. On my AutoCAD here, that's this big white or gray rectangle at the bottom. So as I kind of referenced back a little bit, there's a few ways we can kind of use AutoCAD tools. I can pick them from the ribbon itself. Or if I'm already kind of familiar with tools, I can use the command line to quickly access those tools without having to kind of search for them or find them. So in the command line, I can type in line here, and that will give me my line tool. So I didn't have to kind of look through, file through these tabs, look for the line. I know line's pretty easy to find, but with more complex or like more hidden and niche tools, they might be a bit harder to get at. So the command line can be helpful for that. The command line also lets us use, oh, wrong. There we go. The command line also lets us kind of access settings. As we kind of had that little issue earlier in the command line when that ribbon was missing at the top, typing in ribbon will show the ribbon again. So our command line can kind of access a lot of settings really quickly for us, can access tools really quickly. If I type in line here, we can also do our specifying of the first point through the command line. So technically speaking, you could do all of your AutoCAD work without even touching your mouse. So I can type in all the coordinates here. Without ever touching my mouse, my cursor is not moving at all. So it's a bit of a quicker way to go through AutoCAD. You'll often find with AutoCAD itself, it's not a hard tool to use at all. The main kind of drawback of AutoCAD is it gets pretty tedious at times. So it gets kind of slow picking through tools and kind of manually doing a lot of things. So if you kind of feel like you need to, you want to learn to get a bit faster with AutoCAD, then the command line is a great place to kind of start. For our sake, we're just learning fundamentals and the basics. So it's perfectly fine if you just decide to use the tools from the top. Sometimes I use them if I can't recall the name of the tool that I'm trying to look for. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a little slower is all. Okay. Moving on to, we have a number 9 here. Or am I missing something? Oh yeah, number 9 in the bottom right. So in the very bottom right of this screen here is number 9. That is pointing down here, this entire kind of little menu in my bottom right. This is called my status bar. So status bar in the bottom right is going to be a lot of our toggleable settings. So we'll toggle them on and off at different times, depending on kind of what we need in the moment. So compared to when we were talking about the application menu, where it's kind of global settings, those settings are kind of bound to the drawing. We use it for the entire lifespan of that drawing. These status bar menu options are things that we kind of turn on and off as needed to kind of help us speed up with our drawing or kind of make it more precise or give us additional info. So one of the first ones we see down here is display drawing grid. So at times your drawing grid kind of gets in the way, causes a bit of visual clutter. So this would be one thing that we'd toggle on and off to either show or hide the grid, kind of at will. It doesn't affect our drawing at all, unlike our application menu options. This is just something we can turn on and off just to kind of help us out. There's a few other settings in here. We'll get into those in more detail as well. We have things like ortho mode. Does anyone know what orthogonal means? It says on that tooltip there, restrict cursor orthogonally. So orthogonal is just a really fancy way of saying perpendicular. So if I turn on ortho mode here, this would be a tool I'd use if I only want to draw perpendicular lines. So it's going to restrict my line drawing to horizontal and vertical. So if I want really straight, nice right angles in my drawing, I might want to use ortho mode for a bit. And then when I'm done drawing those right angles, then I can turn ortho mode back off. So these are a lot of my tools that I'm going to toggle on and off, just kind of as needed to help me out. Down in here in the status bar as well, at the very, very far right, in the very far corner, there's these 3 horizontal lines. That's my little customization menu. So that's kind of like with my quick access menu, I can add or remove certain tools from that status bar. One of them, or a couple of them that we're going to be using a fair bit from this customization menu is dynamic input and coordinates. Coordinates is going to help me out. It gives me this little coordinate list on my status bar, just to let me know where my cursor is located on my drawing. So if you don't have coordinates checkmarked, you can checkmark it. It's pretty helpful to use. And dynamic input is going to give me some additional options on my crosshair. So when I go into my line tool and choose some options, dynamic input is going to assist me with some additional tool tips beside my crosshair there. So generally speaking, I kind of leave dynamic input and coordinates on at all times. If you don't have them on, you might as well turn them on. They can't do really any harm. They're just extra stuff to help you out. Number 10 is on the right side here, far right kind of center of your right middle, I'll say, of your screen. Then on my AutoCAD, it's this guy over here. This little menu that kind of goes transparent when I move away from it and it highlights itself again. This is my navigation bar. So navigation, meaning kind of movement across my drawing. So these are all my view kind of options for my drawing. First one here we have is pan, this big open hand. So using pan, selecting it changes my cursor to this little white hand. And then by clicking and dragging, I can move my drawing around. I can pan up and down or left and right. Sometimes if your drawing gets really big, not all of it fits on the screen at once. So sometimes we use that to kind of draw or move the drawing around to look at different locations. We also have just beneath it some zoom options. By default, it's set to zoom extents. We'll talk about these just in a little bit when we go into a bit more detail about navigation at the end of this class. But this is all of my settings and controls for changing the view of my AutoCAD drawing file. So if I ever need to move it around to look somewhere else, if I need to zoom in or out or zoom into a specific location, this is everything kind of camera controls for my AutoCAD drawing. And then I think the last one here, yep, number 11 is in the kind of upper middle section here. Number 11 is trying to point at the file tabs. So if I go back to AutoCAD here, that's pointing at this kind of strip just beneath my ribbon here, where it says start and drawing 2, and then all the way to the right end here. This is all my file tabs. So kind of what we briefly talked about again at the beginning of the class. We have the start menu here as one of the file tabs. And then as I open more drawings on AutoCAD, it's going to show them as these tabs here as well. And I can flip between different drawing files. One thing the file tabs kind of help you out with as well is that there's this little asterisk beside my drawing 2. So drawing 2 has a little star symbol, little asterisk, and then drawing 5 and drawing 6 do not. What that asterisk is symbolizing is that there's unsaved progress on my drawing. So if I've made any edits and I haven't gone to save that drawing yet, that little asterisk will appear. So it's a little notification as well that you have kind of unsaved work. So if you're ever kind of paranoid before you close AutoCAD, you can make sure that you saved by just checking if that asterisk is missing or not. If that asterisk is there, it's unsaved. If it's missing, then there's nothing to be saved. My drawing 5 and drawing 6, I just opened those and I haven't touched them, so there's nothing to save on those. From here as well, instead of going to the start menu or the application menu to open new drawings each time, there's also this little plus sign for new drawing. So you can hit that plus sign and it'll give you new blank drawing files as well. Okay. Any questions about the user interface? I think that covers all 11 that are on that image there. Again, if you're not fully certain on all those tools, we're going to get into all of them in way more detail. Just kind of letting you know what each of these areas is called so you know where to look.
Actually, I have a on the right-hand tool side. Are we ever
Yep.
going to use orbit?
No.
No.
Generally speaking, no, we won't be touching orbit. Same with this kind of cardinal rows here, northeast, southwest. We're working exclusively in 2D, so there's no real reason to have to rotate or orbit our drawing. The orbit's mostly for 3D work.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question, though. Any other questions? Okay. If there's no questions, we'll take our quick 10-minute break now, just because it's about 7 o'clock now. So we'll regroup at 7:12, and then we'll kind of carry on with the rest of the chapter here. All right, 712. So we'll continue on here. So I'll share my screen again here. Back to my slides here. So in that AutoCAD user interface PDF, the one I've been using here from week 1, that's this file here. There's also a little cheat sheet just below it of what each of those numbers is pointing at, if you need to kind of recall that name. So where it was pointing at number 1 in the top left application menu, here it is here. So it's just a little list if you need to reference back to what each of these is called. Okay. A couple things I missed before we move on here. To the left of your status bar as well, we have these little tabs. So there's model, layout 1, layout 2. These are our layout tabs. These are kind of used for, use the model space generally for drawing your, whatever drawing you're designing. And then you can set it to a layout, which will show you how that drawing is going to be printed out. So this is kind of a preview of what your drawing is going to look like if you print it out to a piece of paper, physical copy, or if you're going to plot it out to PDF. We'll talk about layouts in way more detail as well, but that's where your layout tabs are located. And then the last thing on the ribbon itself at the top, we also have these tabs for the ribbon to switch it to a different category of ribbon or different type. So we have home, which is all of our kind of basic commands, some of the shortcuts for annotation and blocks. If I go into the actual annotate tab, we get much more details for more tools for annotation. Or if I go into insert, this has a bigger section for blocks. So sometimes we have to switch between these tabs for some extra tools. Okay. Going back here onto the next slide, working with commands. So like I've been kind of parroting for a while now, a lot of the commands in AutoCAD, there's multiple methods to get to them. So when I'm looking for tools, I can just pick them from the ribbon itself. So if I'm using something like line, all I have to do is just left click on line, and now it's giving me that tool to draw my lines. I can use the command line to also type in line, L-I-N-E, and it gives me this little list here, and it auto kind of set it to line. Then from here, I can do the exact same thing. Let me make sure I'm in the command line here. Etc. So I can use the tools themselves. I can use the command line. We also have other areas where tools are located. So if I don't have a command selected here, and I just right click onto the drawing area itself, just by pressing the right mouse button, I also get this little menu. This is called my shortcut menu. Earlier, I talked about the status bar, and in this menu here to turn on dynamic input, I'll show you why we use dynamic input. If I choose line, wrong place to click. There we go.
So can you copy and paste in like a string of commands, like a script,
Yes.
and then so you can make templates, do a script, and then basically make create a template.
Yep, pretty much. So if I was going to copy something that I already have here, I can start with copy. Can I select objects without clicking?
Does it follow structured text format, or does it like use its own kind of format?
It uses kind of its own format. Yeah. If I click the top of my command bar here and pull it up, you also get a history of previous commands that you've put in. You can't really fully script it, I suppose. There are some things you kind of do have to click on. But for the most part, you can get really quick with just using the commands. Okay. Let me double check here. So, right, dynamic input. So with lines, without my dynamic input on, I have it off right now, off of my status bar. Again, if you don't have this button down here, it's this going into the menu. Just make sure you have dynamic input checkmarked so it shows on your status bar. And then it's this kind of little rectangle with the plus sign for dynamic input. This guy here. And having dynamic input on gives us even more menus to choose from. So without it on, if I choose something like line and click around, you can see that that tooltip that was beside my crosshair is now missing. But with dynamic input on, now I get those little prompts. And if you notice here, it says specify next point or another down arrow. Like I mentioned, down arrow means more options. So if I hit the down arrow on my keyboard, I also get another menu. So there's a lot of different places for commands in AutoCAD. I can use this dynamic input menu, that down arrow, to select undo. There's other ways I can do it. I can just type U and press enter, and that will be my undo. We'll talk about these in more detail, but there's just kind of giving you the idea that there's so many different ways to use these commands in AutoCAD. There isn't necessarily a right way, but it's kind of up to personal preference. Some people like picking from the ribbon. By all means, do that. People prefer the command line. Some people like using the dynamic input. Anything works. Which is also kind of what I referenced back on Tuesday. Some people were asking about if there were any like YouTube guides that were good for AutoCAD. By all means, if you feel like you want to use the YouTube guides to kind of help you out, there's multiple ways to use AutoCAD. I'm not going to go into your assignment and check how you did something and say, hey, you shouldn't have used that tool, you should use this tool. As long as you kind of end up with the right product, there's not much that I can really complain about, right? So, selecting commands. So I'll just keep using my little line tool command here because it's kind of basic and easy. So if I select a line just by left clicking on it, I can start left clicking to create more line segments. My main two keys, or well, three keys, I suppose, when using commands are enter, spacebar, and escape. So if I ever press escape, the top left key on my keyboard, that will cancel my command or end my command. So by default, the line tool is going to keep asking me to put more and more line segments. If I press escape at any time, I exit out of that command and end it. Another command or another key that we're going to be using fairly frequently is enter. So if I ever type anything into that dynamic input prompt there, specify first point. If I press enter, I just put in some coordinates there. If I press enter, that will continue my command. So that will input the command. Enter is also used for repeating commands. So if I kind of select rotate here, and I rotate it 90 degrees, yeah, set it back here. So rotate, press enter to go to the next prompt because I confirmed the first prompt. I can rotate it, press enter, and it's gone back to my rotate command again, and I can rotate again. So pressing enter will either continue along the prompts to kind of enter whatever you typed in, or it's going to repeat the previous prompt or previous command. So if I draw lines, I press escape to end that command. I can press enter, and now I have my line tool again. Spacebar effectively does the same thing. If I click around, make my line here, escape to end the command, and then spacebar will repeat the line command. And now I can go back to drawing lines again. And then again here as well, if I ever want to continue along any of these prompts, so I can type 5,5 for my coordinates of my first point. In order to specify that prompt, let AutoCAD know that I'm done typing in those coordinates, I press enter to continue on to the next step. So enter and spacebar are my kind of continue or repeat, and escape is my cancel or exit for that command. We talked a bit about the shortcut menu there, and the application menu. Am I missing anything there? I think I'm okay. Yep, and then press escape that we just covered. Escape to cancel a command, enter or spacebar to repeat the last command. Just kind of to reiterate, right-clicking on your drawing space gives you this shortcut menu. So if it ever mentions a shortcut menu, that's you right-clicking on your drawing space here for this extra menu. Okay, onto the Cartesian workspace. So AutoCAD works on a Cartesian plane. Fancy way of saying it uses XY coordinates. In 3D, it would be X, Y, Z, but we're working only in 2D, so we're only working with XY coordinates. You might have noticed as well, when I choose the line command, as I move my cursor around, those two numbers it's showing there are my XY coordinates. First number being X, second number being Y. And then I also did briefly mention with your status bar to turn on coordinates, just in this status bar menu, turning on coordinates. That will enable this little guy on my status menu or my status bar, and that will also tell me where my cursor is on that Cartesian plane. So if I move towards where that XY is on my screen in the bottom left, those numbers should get smaller, and they do. And if I move away, they should get larger. Same thing with any grid, X counting upwards to the right, Y counting upwards as it goes up. And then down and left are negative. This guy here, might as well mention while we're here, this is called my UCS, or user coordinate system. That is indicating where the origin of my Cartesian plane is. So when we talk about the origin, that's where the 0, 0 point is. So if I choose line and I kind of hover near it, it should read pretty close to 0, 0. So kind of when we went through the line command there, I'll briefly go through it again. When I choose line, it's asking for those coordinates. If I move my cursor around, it's telling me where those coordinates currently are. And then if I type 5, 5, it will place that first point of that line at 5, 5. So 5 on the x-axis and 5 on the y-axis. AutoCAD also does angles. So it will show angles depending on if dynamic input is toggled on or off. So if I go back to drawing my lines here, I can draw a horizontal line. And then when I go to draw this next line connected to it, I no longer have two coordinates. I now have a length and an angle. So AutoCAD also does angles. In order to switch between the two, I can press Tab. The Tab key on my keyboard will switch me between length and angle. So AutoCAD will also figure out kind of angles for you. So I can make sure this is 50, type in 50 for my angle, press Tab, and then type in the length, put in something like 2, and press Enter. And now that should be a 50-degree angle there. Let me get the opposite angle. Do I have? Yeah, I do. There's another parallel line here. And then I get my 50 degrees there. So AutoCAD will also handle angles on top of lengths and coordinates. That angle prompt as well on your crosshair is only available with the dynamic input. The angles on AutoCAD as well, they work just like a Cartesian plane or any graph that you've worked with. If I draw this line here, my angle will increase as I go counterclockwise. So as I go counterclockwise, that angle is increasing. And then if I go back, the angle will decrease. If I type into the prompt something like a negative 50 degrees, then it's going to flip it upside down because it's going clockwise instead. So by default, AutoCAD angles increase counterclockwise and decrease clockwise. Okay, we'll move on to opening drawings. So opening drawings we kind of already talked about with the application menu. You can either use the application menu, the start window, or the quick access toolbar. Going back to my AutoCAD here, we have open in the quick access menu. We have it in the application menu. And if I go back to my start tab, it's also here on my start menu. So whenever I hit open, it'll give me my file explorer here, and it'll ask me to find a drawing file in my computer to open. So I can choose, I have these ones from earlier. I can choose a file and open it, and it'll open that drawing file for me. So open is for existing files. That file has to be saved somewhere on your computer already. New is for creating new blank documents. We talked about multiple drawings. You can have multiple drawings open in the file tabs. To close drawings, there's a few different ways. We can use the application menu to close them. The upper right corner of the drawing window will close them. And the file tabs themselves have a little X for us to close drawings. So when I was kind of making a bunch of new drawings here, I'm just hitting the plus sign on that file tab. There's the little X sign on the file tabs themselves that will close that drawing. I can also use the X in the drawing window itself, just up by my cardinal rows there, and close that. Or I can go into my application menu, and there's a close button in here. This one gives me close current drawing and close all drawings. Okay, so we'll go through practice 1A. This is a real simple one. If you don't have the textbook, practice 1A is in chapter 1 of the textbook, but I've already uploaded chapter 1 just in case you don't have the textbook yet. So in Brightspace here, we have AutoCAD textbook chapter 1. If you open this PDF, again, this is under the week 1 folder. opening this AutoCAD textbook chapter 1, or if you just have the textbook already, and going down to practice 1A in chapter 1. We'll go through this real quick together as well. I'll just give a second for everyone to kind of orient themselves to practice 1A. Okay, so this is a real simple one. It's just about opening files. So we're going to go through it together here. So in this practice, you're going to be using select file dialog box to open 2 existing files and view them as shown in this figure here. So we'll go through the steps. AutoCAD's already open. We've been kind of playing with it for a while now. In the quick access toolbar, click open. If you're in the start tab initial window, use open files in the drop-down list. First things first, before we get carried away here, we do need a drawing file to open. So we're going to need 2 files, 2 .dwg drawing files. We're going to need buildingrock.dwg and buildingside.dwg. Or do we need to rename it? I think so, yeah. So where would I get these files from? Where's buildingrock.dwg? If you can recall from Tuesday. Okay, so any files that we need for these practice problems or anything like that, they're always going to be in our Brightspace. So back to Brightspace here, textbook chapter practice files. In this folder here is all the drawing files, all the templates, all the blocks, anything we need like to do any of these practice problems. So there's a whole crap ton of files in here. So you might have to use Control F to find and page. Just make sure you scroll down and load more. And then I can Control F and look for, what was it called? buildingrock.dwg. So I'll look for building rock, and here's my building rock file. So you can click on the arrow there and download that. So we can use it for this practice problem. So following along with the steps here, I'll go back to my AutoCAD. Once I have that downloaded, I can then use any of the 3 opening methods of opening files. Choose your pick, whichever you prefer. By selecting that open, it now takes me to my file explorer. I'll re-download it just so it goes to the same place it'll probably go for you guys. And by default, it's going to set me to my downloads folder on my computer. And I can see there, I just downloaded Building Rock. So I can click on that. I can either double click it or I can click it and then hit open at the bottom right. And that should give me my Building Rock drawing. Back to here. So we selected the buildingrock.dwg in the files folder and hit open. The drawing's now open and displayed in my drawing space or my drawing window. You can start the open command again, and we'll download now buildingside.dwg. So I can go back to my practice files here. Building side is just beneath the building rock file on Brightspace. So I'll hit that down arrow hit download again to download that drawing file. And then same thing, going back to AutoCAD and opening that drawing file as well. So I'll hit open, any of your preferred methods of opening, building side, and then open, or you can double click on the file and it'll open. So I'll double click this time. And that will open our building side drawing. So scrolling down to step 5 here, in the File tabs bar, in addition to the Start tab, now the names of both the drawing files are displayed as tabs, as shown in this figure here. So if I go back to my AutoCAD, I've opened those 2 drawing files. So now I have, just close this blank one. I now have Start, Building Rock, and Building Side, all present in my File tabs here. Next, it asks me to click the application menu and click Open Documents, just to show that they're now in my recently opened files. So if I go back to my application menu here in the top left, now by default, it's showing my recent documents here. And there's my building rock and my building side, because I've recently opened those. So it's showing me that those were recently opened documents. Just in case, again, if you're working on a project, you go close AutoCAD, you go grab a snack, come back, and you want to reload, you don't have to kind of look through your files all the time. You can just choose it from your recent documents there. Okay, and then in the application menu, in the Open Documents list, select buildingrock.dwg. So going back into my application menu again, down to Open, back to my recent documents, I should say, and then Building Rock. By clicking it, it should make that tab active. If I go to Building Side, it'll just make it active. It won't open a duplicate instance of that drawing file. It'll just redirect you to the one that you have open. Going back, Control Home will set you back to the Start tab and show the initial Start window displays. We've kind of gone over that before. In the Start window in the left pane, select Recent. In the right pane, select Building Side to make it active. So if I go back again, this is just referring back to my Start menu, where we had the Recent tab on the left pane. And now, since I've opened Building Side and Building Rock, those are listed in my recent files. So if I select Building Side, it will make Building Side the active drawing. It won't open a duplicate. And then finally, in the File tabs bar, right-click in the Building Side tab and then select Close All. If prompted to save changes, click No. This closes all of your open drawings and the initial Start window displays again. So if I go back to AutoCAD here and right-click on Building Side, remember, right-click gives us a shortcut menu. And in this shortcut menu, we have Close All. So I can click Close All, and that will close all of my active drawings. It's asking me here if I want to save changes to Building Rock. I'll hit No. And now I just have the Start menu again. So it's just a quick exercise into showing you how to open and close documents or drawing files. Okay, any questions about that? Pretty straightforward. I know it's a bit tedious. Okay. Moving along here. I'm going to open another blank drawing here. I believe the next section, scrolling down here, yep, is viewing your drawing. So this is going to be a bit more into our navigation tools. specifically zoom and pan mostly. So for viewing our drawing, like I kind of mentioned, we sometimes our drawings are very large or they might have really fine details that we need to zoom in or zoom out for. Sometimes our drawings are really large and we want to look to a specific section of that drawing. So we might use pan to drag it to a certain location to look at different details, different areas of that drawing. So we'll go over some of the tools related to viewing your drawing. First things first, using your mouse wheel on your mouse, so just the middle button here, rolling it away from you will zoom in, and rolling it towards you will zoom out. Fairly common with other softwares to kind of use the mouse wheel to zoom in or out. If you need to pan, which is clicking and dragging that drawing around, you will click in the mouse wheel and then drag your mouse. So if I go back to AutoCAD here, rolling my mouse wheel in will zoom in, rolling it out will zoom out. And then if I click with my mouse button and then drag around, I should be able to pan. So those are mouse shortcuts for navigation. And then on top of that, we have our navigation bar on the right for pan and for zoom. This is defaulted to zoom extents. We'll talk about that in a second here. But there's a little down arrow beneath zoom extents, and we have another little shortcut menu. So in here, we have zoom extents, zoom window, zoom previous, and zoom real time. Real time will act very similar to using our mouse wheel to zoom in or out, just by clicking and dragging to zoom in or out. We also have zoom extents. What this does is zooms to the extents of our drawing, basically. So if I draw something like a circle, and I want to zoom so that circle fully kind of fits into my drawing window, I'll hit zoom extents, and it'll zoom so that circle fits within my drawing region. Another way we can use zoom extents is if I change my zoom here, I can double click with my mouse wheel, and that should zoom extents as well. So by double clicking, this kind of helps sometimes with centering your drawing. The AutoCAD drawing space is infinitely expanding, so you can go infinitely up or right or left or down. So sometimes you kind of, if you mess up a little bit with panning and zooming, you might get lost in your drawing because there's not really like landmarks or little places to let you know where you are. So if you double click with your mouse wheel, it'll recenter you back to where your drawing is. We also have zoom window in here. Zoom window will prompt me to create a box. So it's specifying the first corner of the box, specifying the opposite corner, and AutoCAD will try its best to fit your drawing space to that rectangular shape. It's still got to match the aspect ratio or the kind of size of your monitor. So it doesn't do a perfect job every time, but it tries its best to fit the camera into that rectangular space. We also have zoom previous, and this just resets to whatever your previous view was, your last command, basically, for zoom. So if I used zoom extents, and then I go to kind of drag around and look around, I can use, zoom extents, and then I'm just going to pan around. Go back to zoom previous. If I hit the arrow here, zoom previous, and it should set me back to a previous zoom that it was at. So that's mostly more or less our navigation tools. Mostly we'll just be using zoom and pan. Zoom extents, again, is just to kind of help you recenter yourself if you get lost in the Cartesian workspace there. Otherwise, we won't really be using many other viewing tools. And again, we won't be using anything like orbit or show motion or anything like that, just because we're not using a 3D workspace. Okay, we'll skip 1B for now and move on to saving your work here. 1B you can kind of do on your own time. I'll leave 1B and 1C if you guys want to do it on your own time. It's just two more little practice things for navigation and for saving work. But we're just going to kind of talk about saving work. I think it's a bit tedious if we kind of go through each of these little examples here. Okay, so saving your drawing. We kind of talked about opening a drawing or creating a new drawing. How do I actually go about saving that drawing file? So again, just like most of our other commands, there's multiple ways that we can do this. We can use the quick access toolbar, the application menu. You can even use the command bar to save. And then we talked a little bit at the beginning of the class between the difference between save and save as. Save will just overwrite the current existing file with the same file name and the same location for that file. So if it's in my downloads folder, it'll save it back to that same drawing file in my downloads folder again. Save as lets me choose a new file name and location if I choose. If there's no current saved location for that drawing file, say I tried to make a new drawing file and I made a drawing on there, there's nowhere that that's currently saved because it was a new drawing, then I can use save as, or I have to use save as to choose that file name and location. Save as also has the added kind of benefit here. If I go to save as in my application menu, I can also choose the type of file that's being saved as. So we have a few different little extensions here. I can save it as a drawing template. I can save it as some older versions of AutoCAD drawings. So it's also going to determine the file type of that file being saved. By default, it's going to set it as the most recent type of AutoCAD drawing file, the 2018 drawing file, and then again with the extension .dwg. So I can use the save as. I can rename the file to whatever I want. So I'll just call it temporary file. Oh. I can choose a specific location. If I don't want it to go back into my downloads, I can set it to my desktop. Anything like that. And then when I hit save, it'll save my drawing file. Let's just give me a little pop-up there. And you can see that the file name has now changed on my file tabs. It's now called temporary file because I've saved it as that name. At the top of my screen, it also shows me where that file is located. C users, my name, my user, and then temporary file.dwg. So it's giving me all these little locations where it's telling me where that file name or what that file name is as well. And now, since I've put it on my desktop, I can see that temporary file is saved to my desktop as well. And again, multiple ways to use save. You can either use application menu, save as, or you can use the quick access toolbar for save as. You can even type in save as, and that's a command that you can use. So I can type in save as to use that as a command. Any way works, up to personal preference. Okay. So that pretty much concludes chapter 1. Again, if you want to go through 1B or 1C just for some extra practice, by all means, chapter 1 at the end has a little quiz. If I go back to the textbook, scrolling down to the end of chapter 1, there's this little review question quiz. If you feel like going through that just to make sure you're solid in these commands and these tools, by all means, go through it. Other than that, that kind of concludes chapter 1 and our class for today. If you have any questions, feel free to stick around. You can ask. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for tonight.
Thank you, Brent.
Yep. Yep, you too.
So Brent, other than the
Excuse
Yep.
me, Brent. We don't have any quiz or anything on the D2L, right, for chapter 1?
No, for chapter 1, we don't have any assignments and there are no quizzes. Yeah. The first assignment will go out next week.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yep,
And
no
have a good
problem.
night.
You too. Yep, thanks guys. See you next week.
later, Brent.
All right. Thank you. See you next week.
Yep, see you then.
Thank you.
Hello, Brent.
Yep.
I wasn't here in the first class, but I watched the recording and yeah, I pretty much downloaded the AutoCAD successfully and everything. I had a question about the textbook.
Sure.
Is it like necessary to have it or it's optional?
You will need some kind of access to it, just because one of our first assignments is in the textbook itself, and a lot of our practice examples that we'll be going through in class are in the textbook as well. So you will need that first book, at least some kind of access. If you want to look for a cheaper version, the older versions are pretty much the same. So if you want to get a pre-used one, that's fine.
Okay, the new one is
Yeah.
$90, but there,
Yeah.
if I want, I can also ask for older version.
Yep. If you have a way
Okay.
that you can share it with a classmate, that's fine. If you want to buy an older version, that's okay too.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Have a nice.
You too.